Hi, here is Magno Borgo, and this is the Mocha Pro training for CMIVFX. Mocha Pro is a software from Imagineer Systems, and the power of the software is based on the planar tracking technology. The planar tracking technology will enable you to do your job faster and with great quality when realizing common post-production tasks like rotoscope, tracking, stabilization, insertion, and removals. The planar tracking, instead of using points, like most of the other softwares do, will use a search region that is inside the layer shape, and this shape will be able to track the planes of the image. So the tracker will be able to identify scale, rotation, translation, distortion, and also perspective changes on the image being tracked. With the information from the planar tracking, the Mocha Pro modules can give you faster and unique results. For example, the removal module will enable you to create clean plates and remove unwanted elements from shots in a very easy way. Another example is the insert module that makes the placement of images on surface very easy and with very advanced controls. Another great feature is that Mocha Pro can export the tracking data for several other softwares, making it a great asset for any post-production pipeline. So I hope that you like the training, and let's get started. Alright, let's get started. I will show you how to create a new project and also do a quick user interface overview. To create a new project, you hit File, New Project, or you can click on this icon here on the left side. The first thing you need to do is import your clip, your image files or QuickTime movie. You need to locate your files, and here you can see that Mocha Pro accepts most of the industry standard formats. On the case of this project, we are working with TGA files, and it's an image sequence, so you can click on any image from the sequence and Mocha Pro will automatically identify the sequence. The new project window now is filled with the information based on your images, like the pixel aspect ratio, frame rate, and so on. When you are using QuickTime files, this information here will be almost always correct, but in the case of image sequence, sometimes you need to adjust the frame rate and maybe pixel aspect ratio. I will hit OK. This is OK for now. And now we can see the image sequence loaded here on the canvas. The canvas is this area where we see the image, and this is where we will do most of the work here on Mocha Pro. Below the canvas we have the timeline controls, the tracking controls, and keyframe controls. Above the canvas we have the viewer controls, which are useful functions and tools to evaluate tracking and manipulate the viewer. Above this we have the main toolbar, which contains the icons for tools that we use. On the left side we have the layer controls and layer properties, which we use to organize our layers and control their properties. And below the viewer we have the parameters tab. On the parameters we have each module from Mocha Pro to work on different aspects of the post-production. For now we will focus on the tracking and see how the planar tracking works. Alright, let's get started and see how the planar tracking works. The first thing to do is evaluate the image sequence to choose the best position of the element that you want to track. First, I will be tracking the Britney Spears advertisement. It is visible during all the sequence, so I will start on the first frame. To start tracking, you need to create a layer, and the region inside the layer will be the tracked area. Mocha Pro has two layer tools, the X-spline layer and the Bezier layer tool. The tools do the same thing, just the drawing method and the way you manipulate the shapes that you draw are different. But the results will always be the same for the tracking. The X-spline tool has these blue handles, and the handles controls the shape smoothness. When drawing your layer, avoid the elements that are not in the same plane of the surface that you want to track, like the traffic light and the windows. The tracking layer does not need to be a perfect shape matching exactly the surface that you want to track. It can be a loose shape. Depending on the nearby regions, you can also try to draw the layer bigger than the actual surface that you are tracking. Alright, this shape is fine. So to start tracking, come here on the tracking controls and hit the track forward button. You now can see that the tracker is working here on the status bar. So far the planar tracking is working well. The layer surface is following the movement. This is indeed a very easy tracking subject. Now that the tracking is complete, the timeline turned blue, and this tells us that this layer, layer 2, is already tracked. Double click to rename the layer, and I will call this layer Britney Track. After the tracking is complete, we need to verify the tracking quality. We have some tools to do that. We need first to set up a surface. The surface is this blue rectangle, and the surface is in fact the region used by Mocha to do inserts, and also the region that is exported to other softwares. Usually the surface is placed on the corners of our tracked subjects, and when the surface is ready, we can move and turn on the planar grid to evaluate the tracking. The planar grid will give you a visual reference to evaluate the tracking. I will hit play here. You can easily spot any problems or distortions when looking to the planar grid. It's a very stable tracking, but I identify a problem here on the beginning by looking at this line of the planar grid. You can see a small distortion on this area. It's not a big problem, and I would say not bad for a tracking using the default parameters. That's okay for now. I will move on for the next example. I will disable the visibility of the planar grid and the surface. At any time, if you want to modify your tracking or retrack, you just need to move to the timeline position that you want and hit the tracking buttons forward or backward. This tracking is fine for now. I will move on to the next example. Before moving to the next example, it's a good idea to turn off the visibility of this layer and also the tracking icon from this layer. When I turn off the tracking icon, the software can't modify our already good tracking data, so it's a great way to avoid losing what we already have done. Let's take a look here on the next example. The Iron Man advertisement is a little bit harder to track because on the beginning of the image sequence, the advertisement almost leaves the frame. So the best position to start tracking will be here on the end of the sequence when the advertisement has full visibility. For this one, I will use the Bezier layer tool. The tool uses the classic Bezier handles to modify the layer shape. I will try to avoid the areas that are not on the surface, like this lamp. And to close the shape, you can also click on the first point of the layer, or you can right click like we did before with the x-spline. So you can see that I tried to avoid these elements here because they are not on the same plane, and the lamp as well. And now I will track backwards this time, so let's take a look on how it will work. So far it's working, and one of the greatest advantages of the planar tracker is that when the region leaves frame, the planar tracking can use the rest of the information to keep tracking the entire surface, even though if there's only a small piece of the original surface. Looking at the timeline, you can see that to the right we have the blue region, and this tells us that this region is already tracked. I will hit the track backwards button again, and let's watch the tracker working. Alright, I have reached the beginning of the sequence. The tracking looks good. You can hit play by pressing the spacebar. Not bad. It's possible to see that on the beginning of the sequence there's some drifting, but we can try to fix that later. I will move to the end of the sequence and turn on my surface and position the surface corners. You can see on the viewer on the left side that Mocha Pro gives you a small zoom window that helps the corner placement with a higher degree of precision. Okay, I will turn on the planar grid and hit play to verify the tracking quality. Let's zoom out a bit and hit play. Yeah, here on the beginning we can see that some heavy distortion is happening, and looking here closely to this corner, the corner is far away from the original position. Well, this is clearly because of the lack of information from the surface, but I would say that's not bad for this kind of situation. I will turn off the surface and rename this layer. I will call it Iron Man Track 1, and I will turn off the visibility and the tracking icon. And now I will show you an alternate approach to try to improve this tracking. I will create a new layer, and this time I will start tracking from the beginning of the timeline. I will zoom in a bit. You can do it by pressing plus key on the numeric keyboard, and I will draw my layer here covering only this small portion of this surface. Right click to finish the shape, and let's start tracking forward. Let the tracker work for a few frames and hit stop. And now take a look on something that is possible to do. You can at any time expand this area to improve the tracking. You are just telling the software to look for a bigger area than before. And this is a great feature because the tracking data that we already have will not be changed. Just after this keyframe, we will start to use the bigger area. Okay, let's continue the tracking. Hit stop, and you can change the layer several times. It's not a problem. Just go adjusting the layer and tracking forward and repeating this process. Advance a few more frames, stop, adjust, cover a bigger area. You can edit points by dragging, and the bigger the area covered, the better. I will adjust one more time. You can also insert new points if you want. To insert new points, you need to use the point insertion tool. Click with it on the layer shape, and now we can move these points and improve our search area. Always trying to avoid these elements that are not on the same plane, like this lamp. Track forward again, and now there's no need to adjust the layer shape, so I will go tracking until the end. Turn on surface to check the tracking quality, and each layer has its own surface, so we have to set up this again. And one important thing to know about the surface is that you can't animate it. The only way to improve a surface is on the Adjust Track module, where you can animate the corners. Okay? You can also move the surface by clicking on the edges. Alright, I will hit play and turn on the planar grid and check the quality of this surface. Zoom out a bit. Yeah, not bad at all, but we can still see some distortion happening here on the beginning of the sequence. But still a better result than the previous layer that we tracked. Alright, the main point of doing this tracking 2 times is to show that sometimes you need to take a different approach depending on the subject that you are tracking, until you get a decent track to use. Well, for now this was the best approach. I will rename this layer to Iron Man Track 2, and now I will try one last track for the same surface and show you another approach. I will move to the end of the sequence again and create a new access spline layer. Usually I like to use the access spline layer. I do not like the Bezier handle controls, but it's really up to you to choose the one that you are more comfortable with. You can adjust the access spline layer handles all at the same time if you want. I will try to keep this layer shape here as long as possible while we track, and when the layer starts to leave the frame, I will show you another possibility to try to improve this tracking. I will introduce a new layer shape to help the other layer to improve the tracking. Mocha Pro gives you the possibility to add additional areas to the same layer using both the Access Spline and the Bezier spline tool by clicking on the second icon after the main layer tool. And now I will try to give this tracker more information by trying to use another surface that is on almost in the same plane like the Britney Spears advertisement. You know, it's not on the exact same plane, but I think that's worth a try. Okay, so now you can see that we have another search area, but this is not a new layer. Both areas are inside the same layer, layer 5. And now I will keep tracking backwards, but with the additional help of the new shape. I will bring these points a little bit inside the area. These ones too, I will move a little bit to the inside and start tracking. This region is starting to move down. I guess I will go back to my original keyframe and adjust this region to try to avoid this problem. Remember that you can anytime move back on the timeline and retrack over an already tracked region. Yeah, the region now is way more stable than before. So let's keep tracking until the beginning of the timeline. Okay, now I will move to the end of the timeline and set up my surface. Remember to use the small zoom window to place the corners with precision. And if you want, you can turn on the planar grid while moving the corners of your surface. Okay, now I will zoom out and play to verify the tracking quality. Not bad at all. Still not a perfect result, but you can see here on the beginning that the surface corner is not moving too far away from the original position, and way better than the first tracking that we did. But still not a perfect result. Anyway, with the last examples, I wanted to show you how to use the planar tracker, and that sometimes you need to take different approaches to track surfaces that leaves the frame or are difficult to track at first. And you will see later that the Adjust Track module can help you to further improve the results of these tracked layers by correcting the surface using animation. Now I will show to you how to do rotoscope inside Mocha Pro. First I will load my image sequence, and before we get started I want to show to you some of the parameters of the new project window. For example, if you are working with interlaced footage, you need to choose here the correct setting for upper or lower field order. This project footage is progressive, so I will leave it off. On the Advanced tab, we have the frame offset parameter, which is the starting frame of your timeline. So here you can change to 0 or another number if you want. You can also here modify your timeline to timecode format. The cache clip option will force Mocha Pro to load your clip on the memory before you start working in your project. It will try to fit all the images possible into the system memory. And here, on the color parameters, you can choose your desired color space environment. That can be linear, logarithmic, or panalog. The log option will enable the offset, reference white, reference black, soft clip, and gamma. You really need to configure these parameters, especially if you will be working with the insert and removal models. I will go back to linear. This project is linear color space, and hit OK. The cache clip option was turned on, so you can see here Mocha loading the images on memory. Okay, so let's take a look at the clip. I will be rotoscoping the face edge to isolate it from the background. And I will also rotoscope the iris of the eye to provide a matte to the compositor to change the eye color later. Before we start actually to rotoscope, we need first to create a planar tracking layer. And this is the basic Mocha Pro workflow. You need a planar tracking layer before you can use the other tools. So I will start here drawing a shape for this eye region, and this will be used to help us rotoscope the left eye iris. You can see that this is a bigger region than the eye. The layer was created at frame 4. I will track backwards first, we'll come back here on the keyframe, and now track forward until the end of the sequence. Let's wait the tracker. The tracking process is finished. I will rename this layer. I will call it left eye track. And now to create the rotoscope shape, I will get closer by pressing the plus key on the numeric keyboard. I will disable the tracking layer and start drawing the rotoscope layer with the X-spline layer tool, always trying to create the layer using the minimum points to achieve the subject outline. Alright, select all the points and use the handle to smooth the shape. It's also a good idea to get closer and do some fine detail adjustments. And do it right now, because later, after you start animating this shape, you can get into a lot of trouble if you need to make this kind of finer adjustments. I will rename the layer. I will call it left eye roto. And now, to use the track information from the other layer, we need to come here on the layer properties and on the link to track option, select the tracked layer, left eye track. And from now on, you can see that the tracking icon for this layer is disabled. And if we hit play, let me zoom out before hitting play, and now you can see that the rotoscope layer is linked to the tracking information of the other layer. So this is the usual workflow to create rotoscope layers using Mocha Pro. Now let's take a look on how to use the viewer controls to evaluate the rotoscope quality. Here on the viewer controls we have several tools, and to evaluate rotoscope quality we often use the mattes button and the overlay controls. The mattes by default works only on the selected layers. Okay, so you need to select a layer and enable the matte button, and we can see the matte here as a red overlay. By turning off the overlay button, we disable all the controls directly to the right of the button, and this will clear the viewer from all the layer controls, leaving only the red overlay from the matte button. And now we can better evaluate the rotoscope by pressing play. Well, the tracking is very good, but I think that we can improve the shape a bit. I will bring the overlay back, and by clicking at any point you can see where the keyframes of this layer are in the timeline. In this case it is at the last frame. We should modify the shape of the layer at the keyframe to avoid creating an unwanted animation on other point of the timeline. I will add a point here to the shape and reposition the other points to better cover the iris. Turn off the overlay and hit play to review the rotoscope. Another way to evaluate the rotoscope is by clicking here on this bucket. The layer must be selected to work. This will enable you to review the rotoscope over a neutral background, and this is a great way to check for layer drifting or background color contamination. Okay, I will hit stop, turn off the matte, and turn on the overlay back again. Before moving to the next eye, I want to show you how to do edge feathering on a rotoscope layer. It's easier to see the edge feathering with the matte on. Let me adjust the viewer controls. Okay, with the red overlay, we can see that the matte edge is very hard. We can smooth this matte edge by using edge feathering. To do that, you can manipulate the layer points by using the inner and edge points tools. Well, this is how it works. The pick tool by default uses this first icon that moves both the inner and edge points at the same time. So when you drag a point, you are moving both controls at the same time. This second icon will move only the inner point, creating a feathering effect. The inner points should be moved inside the mask. Okay, I will hit undo and move to the edge point tool. Move the edge points outside the mask to create the feathering effect. And the last icon, the one with A, is the move inner and edge points independently. With this tool, you can move both points at the same time. With the two previous tools, you can only modify the specific point type. You can't modify an inner point with the Move Edge Point tool. And the same to the inner point tool, you can select edge points with it. I will undo a couple of steps here and show to you how to create a feathered edge for this shape using this kind of points. One option is to do it manually, and we should do it at the keyframe, which is on the last frame of the sequence. And at the keyframe we can come here and move the points one by one to create a small feathering on the edge. This is one possible way to do it, but there is an easier way to do feathering here on Mocha Pro. I will undo these steps, and the other way to create feathering is by using the Edge Properties tab. Using the Edge Properties, you can quickly create a fixed edge width for your shape layer. Here we have the edge width set at 3, and if we click on Set button, the whole shape will now have a feathering of 3 units. Let's try a bigger value to get a smoother feathering. Now I set this to 10 and turn off the overlay. Each time you press the Set button, your edge feathering will be reset to the new value. But if you press the Add button, the new value will be added to the feathering. You can also use negative values to subtract from the feathering. And if at any time you want to reset the feathering, just use 0 and click on Set button. It's also possible to set edge width to individual points. Just select the points and apply the new value. You just need to be careful because the edge feathering is an animatable value. So for our layer, we need to be sure that we are at the keyframe to set the edge feathering. So let's do it. I will use an edge width of 5. Oops, I need to select the whole shape and turn off the overlay to check I deselected the layer by mistake. Alright, 5 is good enough. I will move to the next eye. Remember that you can manipulate the viewer using the zoom. The shortcut is the Z key, and to pan the viewer you can use the icon, use the X key on the keyboard, or use the middle mouse button. I will now create the tracking layer for the next eye. Turn on the overlay to see the layer shape. Okay, I don't need the matte to be on. Rename the layer to something more useful. Right eye track. Let's start the tracking process. It's an easy track, simple surface. Now turn off the layer attribute and let's draw the iris rotoscope layer for the second eye. Smooth the shape and let's adjust a few points. I will undo, I was on the move edge points mode. For now I will move both inner and edge points together and set up the edge width for the whole shape. Let's give the rotoscope layer a nice name. Right eye roto. and link the rotoscope layer to the tracking layer. Okay, time to review the rotoscope. Turn off the overlay, turn on the matte, select the layer, hit play, and press the / key on the numeric keyboard to fit the image to the viewer. Yeah, the rotoscope is looking good. I will disable the layer and start the rotoscope of the face. Again, I will start with a tracking layer. I will track the cheek region. Need to turn on the overlay to see the shape. I will turn off the matte overlay and start tracking. When you work with a bigger layer area, the planar tracker starts to get slower. Well, the tracking is working fine. Just need to wait it to complete. Before start drawing the rotoscope shapes, I will check the tracking quality. First, I will give it a name, face track, and turn off the tracking property. Turn on surface, turn on the planar grid, and let's just hit play and review the tracking. Yeah, it's looking fine. Another way that you can review your tracking is using the stabilize button. Hit play, and basically the stabilize keeps the shape fixed on a position, and you can easily identify distortion and drifting on the tracking layer. Yeah, this layer is good enough. I will hit stop and disable the stabilize and start drawing the rotoscope layers for the face. I will draw here two shapes. One for the face edge and another for the nose. Remember to add the minimum points needed to create the shape. I will smooth the points, and I guess that I will add another point here to improve the shape. A small adjustment here, and for the nose I will create a second layer because the layer is on a different plane and will move independently from the face edge. Okay, smooth the shape, a small improvement here and there. I will do another adjustment here. Well, in fact, this region will be covered by the hat rotoscope, so I will leave as it is. Rename the layers, face roto, and here the nose roto. It's important to name the layers because the layer list will get bigger and bigger, and after some time it's easy to get lost and confused, and you don't know which layer is rotoscope or which layer is a tracking layer. So you need to name the layers to get a nice workflow. Now it's time to link the rotoscope layers to the tracking layer. I will link both layers to the same tracking information. I will turn off the tracking layer visibility and hit play to review the rotoscope. Let the sequence play for a few times. Yeah, well, the nose layer is looking good, but the face edge will need to be animated to work. I will need to keyframe the face edge layer to finish my rotoscope. We have some tools that will help us to manipulate the shapes and create the animation. The first one is the Translate tool. The keyboard shortcut is the letter Q. The Scale tool, the shortcut is the letter E. And the Rotate tool with the W shortcut. I will turn on the Translate tool, and using the left and right arrows on the keyboard, I will advance some frames and choose the best timeline position to create my first keyframe. Try to identify a place where the movement direction changes, and this will be a good spot to adjust your shape. I will do the first adjustment here on the frame 7. You can see that the Translate tool will move all the points at the same time. Okay, so now I will keep moving with the arrows and choose the next timeline position to create an adjustment. I will keep doing this procedure as long as it is needed, and always trying to move the whole group of points together and adjusting individual points only when it's really needed. Because if you start to move individual points too much, the rotoscope quality will be really bad. Advancing a few more frames, looking for the next spot. Okay, and here I will need to adjust just these 2 points. The rest of the shape points are fine. I am almost on the end of the timeline. Sometimes you need to go forward and backward a few times before you find the next good spot. And now I'm doing the last adjustment. I will turn on the matte, turn off the overlays, and now, because I have 2 layers, I need to change the matte behavior to all mattes to be able to review both layers at the same time. I will click on the bucket to review over a neutral background, and let's take a look on the results of the rotoscope. It's looking good. There's only a little bit of background contamination here on the end of the sequence. I will adjust the layer shapes to avoid the background contamination inside my matte. I will need to find the best place to create my layer adjustment, and I will do it here at the frame 38. Turn off the overlay to review. The nose shape will need some adjustments as well. I will keep going backwards, and here there's another spot to be fixed. There's a keyframe here on frame 32, so I will do it at the keyframe. Turn off the overlay. Hit the / key on the numeric keyboard to fit the image to the viewer and review the footage. Yeah, now it's looking fine. So for now I will turn off the matte, turn on the overlay, and now that the face rotoscope is finished, I will move to the last piece, that is the hat. The procedure is the same. I will create a new tracking layer for the hat. I like to use the X-spline layer. Let's zoom in a bit and create the tracking area. I will draw the shape closer to the hat edge, but I will try to avoid the eyelashes because they are not on the same plane, on the same surface. Yeah, I think that this is fine. I am on frame 35, so I will track forward and now go back to the keyframe and track backwards. For easy trackings, you can start at any point on the timeline. They usually will work fine. Okay, the tracking is finished. Time to rename the layer. This will be the hat track. Turn off the tracking icon and visibility, and now it is time to draw the hat rotoscope shapes. The hat edge is not well defined. I will deal with the edge later with some feathering. Let's rename the layer, hat roto. Don't forget to link the rotoscope layer to the tracking layer. Okay. We need to smooth the points here. And now let's take a look on the result with the matte color overlay. Hit play. Yeah, it's looking good. Very stable. I believe that I will only adjust the edge feathering to smooth the edge transition. I will turn off the matte, turn on the overlay back again, and do the edge feathering manually using the pick tool with the move edge points option. I will smooth only a few points, not all the points. And let's take a look again with the matte option, but now over the neutral background. Press the spacebar to play. Yeah, it's looking fine. Now I will turn on the rest of the rotoscope layers and review everything together. Let's just close the rest of the face that is not covered, creating a simple layer. Yeah, I need to turn on the overlay to see the shape being drawn. And I just need to create a single big shape to cover the rest of the face. And there's really no need to link it to a tracking layer. So that's it. Here is the full rotoscope. It's looking nice. As you can see, the rotoscope workflow is very simple. You just need to create the tracking layers and link the rotoscope layers to the tracking information. To export your rotoscope from Mocha Pro to other softwares, there are three possibilities. You can export a rendered shape, a rendered clip, and also shape data. That is vector masks for other softwares like Nuke, After Effects, Final Cut, Combustion, Flame, and Shake. First, we will take a look on how to render the rotoscoped masks, because it's an universal approach that will work with all softwares. So here on File menu we have Export Rendered Clip and Export Rendered Shapes. For now let's use the rendered shapes. I will explain the rendered clip option later. The first thing to do here is choose what you need to render. The selected layers, all visible layers, or all layers. The first option is not available because I don't have any layer selected. So usually we want to render only the visible layers, and to do that we need to prepare our project and select the rotoscope layers and be sure that no tracking layer is visible at this time. The next option is the render style, which can be RGB, alpha, or matte only. The RGB will render the actual image with an alpha channel, and the matte only will render only the matte as a black and white image sequence. The matte only is often used because it will render smaller file sizes. The next option is Export To. You can choose between image sequence and QuickTime Movie. On the image sequence, you need to choose the destination of the files and also the file format. Try to use a lossless file format. And the name of the file can have a prefix and a suffix. Usually the prefix is enough. I will call this render matte for the face. Alright, we have the file name, the file format is chosen, the index start is the first number of the image sequence, and index width is the number padding. So the 4 here will give us 0001, 0002, and so on. Well, the render settings are complete, so I will hit OK. And now you can see on the top right corner, Mocha rendering the image sequence. We have to wait the render. Okay, the render is finished. So let's take a look on the image sequence that was rendered. And here I have my TIFF image sequence rendered as a matte only, which results in a black and white image using all the settings that I have done on the mattes, like the feathering and such. So back to Mocha Pro, let's take a look on how to export the rotoscope as shape data. You can do that using the File menu, or you can use this button here on the Track tab. The greatest advantage of using shape data is that you can modify the layer shapes inside the destination softwares. So here we have these softwares as destination options, and depending on the software you will have different export options. For example, the Mocha shape for After Effects will allow you to export the selected layer, all the visible layers, or all layers. You can save this as a file, or you can copy to the clipboard and paste in the desired software. For some softwares like Shake, for example, you can only export the selected layer. If you have several layers, it can be a little annoying because you need to do it one by one. This export limitation will happen with combustion, flame, and the other softwares will enable all the options. A Nuke, Mocha Shape for Final Cut, and also the Mocha Shape for After Effects. Okay. Alright, let's take a look on the last option to export rendered mattes from Mocha Pro. The last option name is the Export Rendered Clip. The rendered clip is kind of a special situation because it's based on each layer's cache. While you work inside Mocha Pro, each layer has a matte that is created for it. These mattes can be seen here on this list, and you can see the matte by clicking on the layer name. So you can see that each layer has a matte automatically created for it. Here is the matte for the left eye. Here's the matte for the right eye. So the advantage of using the rendered clip option is that these mattes are already rendered inside Mocha's cache. So the operation will be really quick. And the disadvantage is that you can only render one matte at a time. The export rendered clip parameters are exactly the same that we saw already in the rendered shapes window, with the limitation of rendering only one clip. So now I will hit OK here, and you can watch on the top right corner that the render is really fast. That's it. These were the three options that you have to export rotoscope mattes to other softwares. On this chapter, I will cover advanced tracking parameters. I have my project already set up, so I will play the footage, and for this project, I will be inserting images into the cell phone screen, but as you can see, there will be some challenges, like the very reflective surface and also the thumb going over the screen area. So we will need to track the screen area, but we can't use it directly because of the reflections. And I have to deal with the thumb. So before tracking the screen, I will create a garbage matte for the thumb. And by garbage matte, I mean a loose mask that I will create as fast as possible. So I will start creating a tracking layer for the thumb, creating a few points to cover the thumb, and I will try to keep this point inside the skin region. I will add a point here on the top, and we are good to start tracking, but I want to explain each tracking parameter in depth so you know what to do and get better trackings. The first section is the pre-processing. The input channel will tell the tracker to use the luminance information or an automatic channel chosen between the three color channels. Usually the luminance will work because it's based most on the contrast of the image, but sometimes the auto channel can help the tracker to do a better job on low contrast, darker, and images with noise. The minimum pixels used parameter will set the planar tracker tolerance when looking for the same pattern between one frame and another. When you know that the tracking area changes a lot, you can decrease this number to get a successful tracking. For the thumb, for example, I will decrease this value because I know that it will deform and it's not exactly planar. The smoothing level parameter is like applying a blur to the image, and this can help the tracker to behave better on footages with a lot of grain or noise. For this project, I will use 0.5 because there's some image compression and noise on it. The next section, motion, is where you can choose what you want to track using the planar tracker. You can, for example, track only the translation, and this will be like using a simple point tracker like we have on most compositing softwares. You can't disable translation. The next options are scale and rotation, and with these three options turned on, you have something similar to a 2-point tracker. By turning on the shear option, which is basically distortion, you will enable the full planar tracker capabilities. And the perspective option is recommended to be used when you have big perspective changes and especially on larger objects. For this project, I will leave it off because it's not a large surface to track. On the right, we have the large motion, small motion, and manual track options. These options are related to the search area and will basically tell the tracker to expect a larger or smaller motion, and the tracking speed, for example, is faster for small motion. The manual track is used on special cases and sometimes to do some removal operations. On search area, you will set the distance that the search area will look for the same pattern between frames. Usually when you have fast motion and big movements, you need to increase these values. To do that, you just need to unclick the automatic setting. For this project, I will leave it on automatic. On the next settings, angle and zoom, you will tell the software what to expect in terms of rotation and zoom between each frame. Sometimes the rotation angle or the zoom is too big between frames and the planar tracker fails to identify these movements. So you need to tell the planar tracker to look for these movements. Use these parameters only when really needed because they will usually increase the tracking times. And the next section, export data, will be used to export tracking and shape data to other softwares. Okay, so let's get started with the thumb tracking. I will first rename the layer and now start tracking forwards. You will see that it's an easy track. Remember that at any point you can go back, reposition the tracking layer points, fix them, and start tracking over again. You know, it's not an exactly planar tracking surface. Sometimes a heavy distortion will happen and you will need to stop and adjust points to keep tracking. But that's okay. Now the thumb is leaving the screen area, so I will not bother to fix it because I will not need the tracking data when it's off the screen. And here is a good point to start fixing the layer shape. So let's move some points. And now I will keep tracking. Okay, the tracking is done. I will disable the layer and start drawing my garbage matte. First, I will try to find a good starting frame to draw my mask. And just draw a loose mask around the finger. There's no need to be a perfect mask. It's just an isolation area. I will rename the layer thumb garbage and link it to the tracking layer. And now start to review the shape and make adjustments. Before the frame 7, the thumb is outside the screen area, so there's no need to adjust the garbage matte. And in fact, if you want, you can tell Mocha using the layer properties that the layer will only start in the desired frame, frame 7. You can also set the out point for a layer if you want. So now let's keep moving forward and doing shape adjustments as needed. I will add a keyframe here because the shape is good until this point, and moving forward I will need to make some adjustments. Just make these points a little bit closer to the edge and keep moving and adjusting the points. I will do a small fast forward on the rotoscope process, and it's just a matter of moving forward and checking the garbage matte and adjusting the points until the process is finished. The planar tracking will help you, but will not save you from some rotoscoping. Okay, the first part of the rotoscope is finished, but there's another part of the thumb that's not covered by this shape. Since it is a different plane, I will create another tracking layer for this part to speed up the rotoscope process. So I will find a good spot to start tracking. I will create the tracking layer here, just for this region. Rename the layer, Thumb Track 2, and start tracking. Here this region starts to leave the frame, so I will stop the tracker, disable the tracking layer, and start drawing the second garbage matte. Another big area covering the other region. Rename the layer, Thumb Garbage 2, and select the layer and link it to the tracking data. I will set up the in and out point for this layer. The layer will start at the frame 30 and end at the frame 60. Alright, so now I will fast forward again. It's just another round of garbage matte rotoscope. There's no big secrets here to show. Just keep moving forward and adjusting the points, using the pick tool, the translation tool, the rotation tool, whatever is needed to do the job as fast as you can. Both garbage mattes are complete, so now we can move on and do the screen tracking. I will start creating the layer on this region for the screen tracking. First, I will use only the top of the cell phone because the thumb do not interact with it and there's no reflection like the screen surface. Okay, I will give the layer a name, screen track, and now I will track backwards first. Okay, I will stop and turn on the surface because it will help us to evaluate the tracking at the same time the surface is being tracked. Okay, let's track backwards. Well, I will stop here and we can see that this top region is very stable, but looking at the bottom edge of the surface, we can see some heavy drifting happening, and this happens because this edge is too far away from the tracking region. We can improve this bottom edge region by adding another tracking layer near this area. So I will go back to my first keyframe of the layer, and using the Add Access Spline tool, I will create a secondary shape here on the side of the cell phone, but I will try to avoid the screen because the screen surface is too reflective, so the surface changes a lot and will give the tracking a lot of trouble if included. So I will keep adjusting this shape and only include a thin part of the screen edge to give the tracker a little bit of contrast to work with. And on the other side, I will create another shape using the same logic. When you have too many points together, you may need to zoom in to select the desired points. And now that I created two new layers, one on each side of the cell phone, I will explain why I created the garbage matte for the thumb. All the layers have a property called blend mode, which is add or subtract. The default for a new layer is add. When you turn on the matte button with the all mattes option, you can see that all the mattes are added together. The blend mode is affected by the layer ordering. The layer that is on top of the list will affect all the layers below. So when I change the garbage matte of the thumb to the subtract mode, you can see now that the garbage matte is subtracted from the screen tracking layer. This will effectively tell the screen tracking layer to ignore the thumb garbage area, so the tracking will only work on the wanted areas. I will do a small adjustment here. I will make the screen track layer active to be able to see the surface of the layer and start tracking again. I will only adjust the surface before start tracking. And now let's take a look on how the tracker will work. It's possible to see that the bottom edge of the surface is not perfect yet, but it's way better than before. And it is very stable, not drifting, which is important. I have reached the beginning of the timeline. I will move back to the starting point and track forward. So we can observe that this tracking would be impossible to do without using these larger tracking areas. And even though the surface points are not perfect aligned, we can fix that on the Adjust Track module. Okay, the tracking is finished. I think that one good question would be, why didn't you use the bottom part of the cell phone? At first, it looks like a good region to use, but the shadow of the thumb on the surface and also the reflections would disturb the tracker and give a worse result. So by using the subtract blend mode on the garbage matte, we improved our tracking data as much as was possible, and now to further improve the surface, we need to go to the Adjust Track module. Before moving to the Adjust Track tab, I will choose here on the timeline a nice place where all the surface corners are visible. I will turn off the matte, turn off the garbage matte layers, and adjust the surface corners to match better the screen surface. I always try to use the small zoom window to do it. And the frame that you are when you move to the Adjust Track tab is important because it will create a keyframe on the timeline and will also set the first master references for each surface corner. I will turn off some overlay elements like the splines and the tangents and select the layer again. So now we have two main elements here, the surface corners that we already know and this red cross, which is the reference point. Each reference point is connected to a surface corner and they can be animated to tweak the surface position. When I select the reference point, you can see here on the top left corner the master frame reference, which will be used as a visual reference to fix the reference point positions over time. So let's take a look on the Adjust Track tab parameters. At the reference point section, we have several buttons. The next button will allow you to cycle between the reference points, and you can also do it by clicking on these corner buttons here on the nudge section. You can select the reference points on the viewer by clicking on them, but I recommend you to use the buttons on the Parameters tab to avoid moving the points by mistake when you try to select them on the viewer. At any time you can set a new master reference for a reference point by clicking on the Set Master, and the Set Master All will set master reference for all the points with one click. Depending on the project, you may need new reference points, which can be created forwards or backwards using these two buttons here. Okay, so let's start the Adjust Track procedure. I will start with the top right corner, which is easier than the others. And the process is very simple. You move on the timeline forward or backward, and by looking at the current frame window, you can compare it with the master frame and see if any adjustment is needed. Here at this point on the timeline, the match is perfect. So I will go back to my keyframe and start moving backwards until the point starts to leave the correct position from the master frame. There is a small drifting here, so I will correct it, but before doing that I will create a keyframe here where the reference point was still good. And now I will keep observing the reference point and make an adjustment here. You can do it by dragging the reference point, or better yet, you can use the Auto button and Mocha will try to match the current frame with the master frame reference. Unfortunately, here the Auto button didn't work. The point was moved downwards of the position, so I will do it manually by dragging the point. Okay, here on the nudge section you have the up, down, left and right buttons, and using these buttons you will be moving the reference point by 1/10 of a pixel, and this is great because you can't have this precision when dragging with the mouse. Now I will check the animation between the two keyframes to see if any further adjustment is needed. And by looking again in movement, I think that the last adjustment needed a small tweak. And now I will keep moving on the timeline and searching for the next correction spot, which will be here. I will use the right button to move it to the correct position. Moving backward, pay attention, a small adjustment here. Okay. Okay, I think that the adjust track for this reference point is finished. A good method to review the adjust track is press play and review the current frame window in real time. I will let it play a few times, and I guess there's a problem here on the end of the image sequence. Looks like the reference point could be a little bit to the right. So let's fix it on the last frame of the image sequence. I like to focus my work on only one reference point at a time, because I think that the final result is more consistent when you are not jumping around between different reference points. Now I will move to the top left corner and keep watching the current frame, comparing it with the master frame until I find a problematic region. I think that I got something here. Before making the adjustment, I will keep my last good position at the frame 55. I will add a keyframe and now move to the problematic spot. Here there's a little jump. I will keep this position. And now I will use the Auto button, and you can see that the current frame is fixed by using the master frame reference. Whoops, I deselected the layer by mistake, so let's select it again and keep looking for the next spot for the adjust track correction. Let's use the auto button again. And one thing that's important to know is that the auto button uses the auto nudge parameters like this search region size, which is now set up to look for a 5 by 5 pixels region. And the maximum motion parameter will set the maximum distance that the auto nudge will look for the same pattern when correcting the reference point. I will increase both parameters, and you can see on the current frame window that we have a bigger search region now to look for the master frame pattern. Alright, so now I will keep moving backwards and look for the next spot. There is a heavy sliding here, so let's fix it. And it's important to know that the auto button can't always be trusted. Sometimes you need to do some smaller adjustments on top of it. Okay, looking for the next point to fix. Another adjustment here. Sometimes you reach a point where the current frame is too different from the master frame pattern. When this happens, it is recommended that you create a new master frame to get a better result from the adjust track. So I will now create a new master frame reference. And from now on, the use of the auto button with the current frame will be more precise because of the new master frame reference. Another adjustment here, and I will need to create one more, move it to the right a bit, and I think that we are done with this reference point. I will hit play, select the layer, and review the reference point in real time. There is some sliding on the beginning of the timeline. So I will try to find the place where the sliding is happening, and it's here. So I will need to make a small adjustment, and it's exactly on the master frame, in fact. So let's fix it, move it to the right, and take a look on the nearby regions on the timeline. Yes, here we have another problematic area between these two keyframes. I guess I will do it manually because the left button is too slow for bigger adjustments. And play again. Yeah, now it's looking way better. I will hit stop and turn on the planar grid to review both top corners of the surface. Yeah, it's looking good. These 2 points were easier points to do, so now let's move to the 2 other points, which will be harder. I will start with the lower right corner, move to the keyframe of the first master frame reference. You can see that there is another keyframe on the timeline, and this keyframe is from the second master frame that was created for the top left corner. But don't worry, it will not affect this reference point. So let's start moving on the timeline and look for the first place to create the first correction. I will use the auto button. I will check between these 2 keyframes to see if the motion is fine, and move forward and look for the next spot. Add a keyframe to keep the current good motion and make the adjustment a few frames later. Well, when you have a good master frame and current frame relationship, when they are very similar, the process is very easy. Sometimes it can be time consuming and a little bit boring, but it's necessary to do it. Now I will move backwards, and there's a little jump here, so until this frame it's fine. I will keyframe the good motion and fix the previous frame. And from this point, I will do a fast forward and keep making the necessary adjustments. Whenever is necessary, when the current frame is too different from the master frame, I will create a new master reference and keep moving using the automatic button as much as possible and making small adjustments until I reach the beginning of the timeline. It's a difficult region to work with because there's a lot of lighting changes, the thumb shadow on that region, and the reflection of the screen that changes a lot. Well, I have reached the beginning of the timeline and all the adjustments were made for this point. It's easy to see looking at the current frame window and also by looking at the planar grid that the point is very stable on the correct place. So now I will move to the last reference point, and this point will be the hardest to do because the finger goes over it sometimes, and when this happens you can't use the automatic button, so the corrections will have to be made manually. Okay, so now I will do another fast forward while I do the first adjustments, and I will stop when I need to do the manual adjustments when the thumb occludes the surface corner. So here is the point where I need to fix the reference point manually without the help of the automatic button. When the surface corner and the reference point are very near, it's easy to drag the surface corner by mistake. So I would advise you to turn off the surface overlay before moving your reference point. I will do that by clicking on the surface overlay button, and now I can drag my reference point, and with the help of the green line I can easily align the reference point with the screen surface edges. And now I will do another fast forward and keep adjusting the point until this reference point is finished, so we can review the new surface based on the full adjust track positions corrected. Alright, the reference point is finished, so now I will hit play and review the new surface, which is really better than the original one. One thing that is important to know is that after you have your reference points on the correct positions, you can further adjust your surface if you need to. I will disable a few of the reference point overlay parameters here on the view section, and I will turn off the planar grid and show you that you can now manipulate your surface and do whatever is needed. And remember that you can't animate the surface points or edges, so this will be all based on the reference points. And if you did a good job with the reference points on the adjust track, the surface that you modified will work as well. I will move my surface to the original position, and now that the adjust track job is finished, you can export the adjusted track data to other softwares by using the Export Tracking Data button here on the Export Data section. On this chapter, I will show to you how to export tracking data from Mocha Pro to After Effects. The element that is exported from Mocha Pro is the surface, and you can export the surface from both the tracking and adjust track modules. You will find an Export Tracking Data button on both modules, and we will use it to export the data for other softwares. We have here 4 export options to use to send data to After Effects. The first 3, as you can see, are corner pin exports, and the last one is the transform data export. The first corner pin option is used to export tracking data for After Effects CS3 and older versions. The second option will export only the corner pin, and the third will export corner pin with motion blur support. I will start with the second option, the simple corner pin. We have 2 options, copy to the clipboard, or we can save the file to the disk, in the case in a TXT file format. I will save this first one to show to you. I will call it After Effects corner pin only and hit save. And so basically it will save it on a text file, and to import it on After Effects you need to open the file, copy all the content, select all the content, copy it to the memory, to the clipboard, and go to After Effects and paste the data on the desired layer. So in both methods you will be using the clipboard to transfer the data to After Effects, but with the save option you'll be able to recover this data anytime if you want. So now here on After Effects I have my footage, and you need to be sure that your composition will be using the exact same settings that you used on the Mocha Pro project. Basically the same frame rate, field settings, and the same pixel aspect ratio. You can check the settings on the Clip tab inside Mocha Pro. So here I will create my composition. I will also import the insert footage for the screen, so I can use it to test the corner pin. Okay, interpret footage of a channel. I will drag it to my composition, and now I'm ready to paste the corner pin data from the clipboard or from the memory. So just be sure that you are on the first frame of the composition and use the Command V or Ctrl V on Windows to paste the clipboard data on the desired layer. So you can see here on the Effects tab that we have now a corner pin, and the corner pin is working as expected. Just be sure that you are on the correct frame, on the first frame, before pasting the data, and the import of the data will work fine. Okay, so now I will just change the name of this layer to corner pin only before moving back to Mocha Pro. And now I will export the third option, the corner pin with motion blur support. I will just copy to the clipboard, go back to After Effects, drag a new layer with the insert footage. I will name it with motion blur, and hit Command V and paste the data on the layer. By pressing the U key, you can see the animated attributes of this layer. I will resize this pane so we can see both layers together, and you can see that the main difference between the two is the position, scale and rotation attributes that are animated for this new layer. If you compare both layers, you can see that the image position is exactly the same for both layers. The introduction of these three new attributes did not change anything, but if you turn on the motion blur for the layer and the motion blur preview, you can see that the new layer will have motion blur applied to it. The other layer that has only corner pin applied will not be able to use the motion blur because the layer doesn't have the transform data on it. Okay, now with both these options explained, I would like to show to you how to use a third option that will use the CC power pin effect. You can't export a CC power pin directly from Mocha Pro, but I will show to you how to do it here on After Effects. First, I will create a new insert image layer. I will rename it CC power pin. And now let's move to the Effect menu and locate the Distort CC power pin effect. The CC is just like a corner pin, but with some improved parameters that give you more flexibility when doing the compositing. So to use the CC power pin, you just need to copy the data from the corner pin that you have imported from Mocha Pro to the CC power pin parameters. I will expand the panel so you can see how to do it. We just need to match the corners and copy the keyframe data from one to the other. If you want, instead of copying and pasting the keyframes, you can create an expression and link the attributes using the animation add expression and use the pick whip to select the related attribute from one layer to the other. The shortcut to add an expression is Alt-click or Option-click on the stopwatch icon. Just link all the attributes and the power pin will be fine. So now that I have my power pin with the correct parameters, let's take a look on the result. Yeah, it's working fine. It's like the other corner pin, but you can use the other attributes of the power pin, like the expansion that allows you to grow or shrink the power pin. Now back to Mocha Pro. Let's take a look on the last option, that is the transform data export. The transform data is different from the corner pin, but is useful to do some operations on the compositing software. So copy to the clipboard, and now back to After Effects. I will create a new layer, but now I will create a new object, which is a helper layer that you can use to paste the transform data information. I will rename the layer to transform data, paste the transform data from the clipboard using Command V or Control V, and we can see here now the transform data in action. We have the anchor point, position, scale and rotation pasted into the new layer. The anchor point will be placed on the center of the surface that you had on Mocha Pro, and you can use this information to create stabilizations or to place objects on this anchor point using the position. So I will create here a new solid layer to exemplify the use. I will call it arrow and draw quickly the shape of the arrow. Just move some points and that's fine. Alright. So now, for example, I can link the position of the arrow with the position of the transform data using an expression. And now let's take a look on the result by scrubbing on the timeline, and you can see that the arrow is following the position that we had, that is in fact the center of the surface. So this is one possible use of the transform data. Another possibility is use the transform data to create stabilizations. If you use the transform data to do a stabilization, the center of the stabilization will use the center of the surface that you had on Mocha Pro. You may ask me, why would you use the transform data to stabilize if Mocha Pro has the stabilize module? Yeah, that's a good question. The nice thing about using the transform data to stabilize is that the center of the stabilization will be set by the surface. So if you want, for example, to stabilize the image using the Sony Ericsson logo, you just need to set the surface around it, and the stabilization will be using the center of this shape. So I will export this option to the clipboard and go back to After Effects. I will create a new composition with the base image and call it phone stabilized. Now I will paste the transform data with Command V. You can see the transform data being centered on the desired position, and now I can start to do the stabilization. The first thing to do is remove the animation of the position. Just click on the stopwatch to delete the animation. And now with the help of some expressions, we can set up the stabilization of the scale and the rotation. This procedure is described on Mocha Pro online documentation, so I will take you there. The expression for the scale is a little bit long. it's hard to remember every time. So here on the exporting tracks, on the using tracks for stabilizing in After Effects, you can see the first expression for the rotation. Copy it, Command C or Ctrl C. Add the expression to the rotation by using the Option key when clicking on the stopwatch icon. Paste the expression and just be sure to remove the space between the dot and the number 5. Back to the online documentation, scroll down a bit to the scale and copy this whole line and go back, Option click, paste the expression, and we are done. Now the clip is stabilized on the position, scale and rotation, and the center will be on the logo. So it's a very interesting application of the transform data, and if you change your surface, you can change the center of the stabilization. To export tracking data from Mocha Pro to Final Cut Pro, you can use both the track or the adjust track modules, and you have two options to export for Final Cut Pro. You can export as Final Cut Basic Motion or as a Final Cut Distort. I will start with the Distort, which is a corner pin option. The export will be saved as a XML file on the disk. And now I will switch to Final Cut Pro. I have my sequence already set up, and I have loaded on the project my background plate and also the image that I will be inserting on the background plate. It's critical that the sequence settings match the same settings from the Mocha Pro project. The frame rate, pixel aspect ratio, and also the field settings should be the same, otherwise the imported data will not work as desired. So to import, we need to go here on File menu, Import XML, select the file, and the options here will be the project that will be the destination, which is the project that is already open, and the rest of the settings just use the default values. It will give you an error message. The message is related to the source clip location, but you don't need to worry. You don't even need to replace the media if you don't want to. The clip is imported on the project bin. I will just drag it to the timeline, and it's already possible to see the corner pin on the clip that was imported. If you double click the clip, you can see here on the motion tab, on the distort options, that we have the distort property with the animation keyframes. So we have two options to do here. We can reconnect the media and search for the insert image to replace, or we can just copy the properties of this clip, and on the destination clip we can paste the attributes, and the distortion will be applied to this clip. Here on the paste attributes window, you need to select the distort because it's the attribute that we want to paste, and unclick the scale attribute times because we don't want to scale the current animation to the duration of the new clip. Okay, so distort, okay, and it's already possible to see the distortion applied to the new clip. I will move it over the background plate, and the process is finished. We can see the keyframe attributes here by pressing this icon. Everything is looking fine. I will just resize the image clip to match the background plate, and the operation is finished. So I will go back to Mocha Pro and use the second export option, that is the Final Cut Basic Motion. It will export the translation, rotation and scale from the current surface to Final Cut Pro. I will save the file to the disk and go back to Final Cut, File menu, Import, XML, find the file, the same settings like before, OK. I'm not interested on the error message. I will just drag the clip to the timeline And let's take a look here. Double click the clip to see on the Motion tab the scale, rotation and center attributes that are animated. The center position is placed on the center of the surface from Mocha Pro. I would say that this information alone is not much useful here on Final Cut. The best use that you can do with this information is create a stabilization for the background plate. To use the motion information to do stabilizations on Final Cut, you need to re-export the tracking data with the Final Cut Basic Motion, but this time select the invert option. Save. I will give it a new name, Motion Inverted. We'll go back to Final Cut. This time I will import the XML by right-clicking on the project bin. Select the file, same settings, no error message. I will drag the clip to the timeline, and it's possible to see a completely different motion here on the new clip. I will create a copy of my background clip, select the new clip, copy with Command-C, and paste the attributes on the background clip, this time with basic motion and no scale attribute times. Now let's take a look on the clip on the canvas, and you can see the stabilization happening using the translation, scale and rotation. If you want to stabilize just the translation, for example, I will show you a quick way to do it, because removing keyframes here on the Motion tab is a little bit boring. So what we need to do is open the XML file on a text editor, like on the text edit. I will open it. I will just drag the XML file from the Finder to the text edit on the dock, and with the file open, I need to locate the information that I want to delete. I'm looking for the parameter tag here, and we have below the parameter another parameter tag with scale inside. So just select this and move down until you find the next parameter tag and delete this whole text block. And here I will repeat the same procedure to the rotation. Find the next parameter tag and delete. So you can see that we are now left just with the center parameter. I will hit save, go back to Final Cut. I will create a bin to throw these clips inside and import the XML file again. It's here. Okay, same parameters. And now I will drag the clip to the timeline, create a new copy of the background clip. This copy has information on it. I will create a copy from the clean background plate. Select the new clip, which has only the stabilization on the translation. Command-C, select the background clip and paste the attributes. We want basic motion, hit OK, and now let's take a look on the canvas. We have a stabilized plate using the center of the surface that we had on Mocha Pro. Now I will show to you how to export tracking data from Mocha Pro to Apple Motion. You have two options, and you can export from the track or the Adjust Track module. So here on the Export Tracking Data, you can export as a motion basic transform or as a motion corner pin, which is the one I will use first. It will save a motion file project. And now I will move to Motion and open my project, locate file. It is asking if you want to update the project file. You can choose any option here. And now I will load my timeline and also my layers tab and resize my image to fit to the window. And you can see that the surface is working, but the background image is not animated, and this is a problem that happens sometimes, so you need to replace the footage with the original ones. So here on the Media tab, I will load my insert image, the street image, and also I will load my background plate, which is an image sequence. And now that I have both files here on the Media, I will detach the tab and we will replace first the background. To do that, just drag the new footage over the layer. It's very simple. If you drag on the timeline, you can see that the footage was replaced. Okay. And unfortunately, for the surface, you can do the same. You can't drag the new image over it to replace. Motion will not allow you to do it. So I will have to undo, and instead I will have to place the image on the project. I will drag the footage here above the background plate. I will resize the new footage to the background plate duration. And now I need to copy the corner pin animation to the new layer. So select the surface, go to the inspector, locate the four corner property and drag it over the new layer. All the information will be transferred for the layer, and if you scrub on the timeline, you can see that it's working. So the task is finished. And back to Mocha Pro, we have the other option to export, which will export motion basic transform. The procedure will be the same, just the type of the data that will be exported will be different. Save the motion project file, open it on Motion, and if it's needed, replace the footage. To export tracking data from Mocha Pro to Nuke, we have two options, which can be exported from the track or the Adjust Track modules. We can export using the Nuke ASCII format or the Nuke corner pin format. I will start with the Nuke corner pin. You can save it as a Nuke file project, save it on the disk and import into your current project. And you can also use the clipboard option to paste the information inside the Nuke. Here on Nuke, I will use the File Import Script option, locate the script. A corner pin node is created. Now I will load my insert image to place over the background. Press R to read a new image. Here is the new image. I will plug the image to the corner pin node and load it on the viewer. So we can see that the corner pin has the surface information on it. It's very easy to set up, and you can turn on the motion blur if you want to add motion blur to the scene. So let's just merge this image over the background. I will hit M to create a merge node and drag the background plane to the B input, and the compositing is working. Let's take a look here on the timeline. And now I will go back to Mocha Pro and show to you the second option that you have to export tracking data to Nuke. Select the layer, and the next option is the Nuke ASCII file format. It will save a text file on your disk. I will create a new name here, Nuke ASCII, hit save. Mocha Pro will create 4 files, one for each tracking corner, so that you can import this information inside Nuke using a tracker node. Hit tab, type tracker, create a new tracker node, and here on the node properties we will need to load the tracking information for each of the 4 trackers. To do that, right click on the animation icon, go into File, Import ASCII, locate your first tracker information, hit Open, hit OK, and now I will turn on the overlay here for the viewer and remove the other node's information from the attribute editor And now we can see the tracker here on the viewer. If we scrub the timeline, we can see that it is moving on the correct position. And I should mention that this is just a tracker. Alone it will do nothing, unlike the corner pin node. So you need to use this tracking information to do stabilization, or use it to link to other parameter that you need to animate and such. But you can't use it to insert the image using only the tracker node. And to load the rest of the tracker files, we just need to enable each of the trackers. And remember that you need to enable the rotation and scale if you want to use this information for calculations inside the tracking node. And after that, right-click on the animation icon, import ASCII, and locate the file, hit OK, and keep repeating this process until you load all the trackers here on Nuke. Alright, so you can see here on the viewer the 4 trackers loaded into Nuke using a tracker node. Here, back to Mocha Pro, it's important to remember that the trackers will be exported using the corners of the surface. So if you want the trackers on other positions, just adjust the surface and you will get the trackers where you want. Alright, so now on this chapter, I will show to you how to use the insert module and its several features. Basically, the insert module is used to place images or footage inside the surface that you have tracked. On previous chapters, we saw how to do the tracking and also the adjust track, and it's important to know that the insert module uses the adjust track information. On the insert module, you can see that we have several tabs that we need to learn about, but to start the insert process, the first thing that you need to do is import the insert clip. Locate your footage. For this project, I will use a single image, but you can use animated sequences, QuickTimes, and so on. Click Import, and from now on, you can see the insert image placed inside the surface that we tracked. You can observe that the insert image has some pixelation and jagged edges, but don't worry, this is just the viewer preview. When you click the render button, the image will receive anti-aliasing and will be displayed correctly. And as a second step here, I will show to you how to load the finger mat that I have created, and also explain the different alpha channels that we can load here on the insert module that sometimes can be a little confusing. So here we have the Comp tab where we find the alpha channel options. To explain the insert clip alpha, let's take a look here on the standard logo that we have inside Mocha Pro. Here you can see the RGB channels, and you can also see that this image has an alpha channel. Okay, so now I will go back to my standard clip and I will load the logo as the insert clip. You can see that the logo is using the transparency in the background, and this is because we are using the Use Insert Clip Alpha option. If I turn the option off, you can see the original background on the inserted image. So the difference between the Insert Clip Alpha and the 2 other types is that the Insert Clip Alpha works inside the surface along with the insert clip. It's also possible to load an alternate insert clip alpha for your insert clip footage. Just click the import option on the pull-down menu. Now let's take a look on how to use the alpha background clip. I will use it to load my finger rotoscope mat. Hit import, locate the files, and this is an image sequence. I will just hit import with the default parameters that are correct. And let's take a look on this mat, finger mat 2. It's just a black and white image that I have created previously. And you can see that I have both alpha and RGB channels for it. Let's move back to the original clip. And now I will hit the Use Background Clip Alpha, and you can see now the finger rotoscope working with the inserted clip. And if you want, you can use the Insert Clip Alpha as well, along with the Background Clip Alpha. Okay? I will move back to my original insert image, and now you can see both elements working together, the finger rotoscope and the inserted clip. At any time, if you want to see the insert clip with a better quality, just hit the render button. Now let's take a look on the last option of the Comp tab, the Layer Matte. You just need to take care with the Layer Matte because it will affect the way your image is rendered. So it is not a good option to be used. Okay? The matte clip is loaded here on this pull-down menu. I will select the Finger Matte 2 clip. You can see the layer matte by turning on the overlay button, and it's represented by this red color. Now I will move to the Comp tab and enable the User Layer Matte option. You can see that it is inverted, so I will hit Invert to correct it. And I have rendered the insert image by pressing the dot key on the numeric keyboard. You can see that the image quality is not good anymore because the Layer Matte has this limitation. So you can't use it to render a good quality insert. To do that, you need to use the Background Clip Alpha. It's usable to load additional rotoscope mattes, but you can't use to render. The last option, the Restrict Filters using Alpha, will constrain the filter effects that we have on the other tabs to work only inside the alpha channels that we provide to the Insert module. Let's move to the next tab, the Region of Interest. It's easier to understand the region of interest when we have this surface on. So the region of interest will basically be used to position the image inside the surface and also to control the proportion or the aspect ratio of the footage inside the surface. When you import the insert clip, the standard behavior is that the insert clip is placed inside the surface, but if we look at the original insert clip, we can see that the aspect ratio of the image is not correct. The image is squeezed inside the surface, but we can correct it using the ROI. When the Lock Aspect Ratio option is selected, the image will be basically scaled using the same aspect ratio that it was before. And when you deselect the option, you can start to distort the image, so it's possible to customize the aspect ratio. The image will always be constrained to the surface, and each box here will control each edge of the image, giving a lot of freedom to place the image anywhere inside the surface. At any time, you can hit the Reset button and the image will be scaled to fit the surface again, based on the surface corners. The Fit ROI to Surface button will use the original Insert Clip image aspect ratio and try to fit it inside the surface as best as it can. You get the best results of this button when the surface is facing the camera. I will hit Reset here, and now I will try the Fit Surface to ROI button. It will in fact match the surface to the original Insert Clip image aspect ratio. Sometimes this is very useful, but it's not the case on this project. So I will move back to the original surface, I will hit Undo, and I will try to match the original aspect ratio so that this image looks better without the squeezing that the original insert had. To the right of the ROI, we have the Offset Tracking. The Offset Tracking will allow you to modify the insert clip position in relation to the original surface. So, for example, if we modify the X position, the insert clip will be moved away from the original surface, but the offset will be constant. At any point you can modify your surface and the offset will be kept. It's important to know that these offset parameters are all animatable, so you need to be careful to not animate the parameters if you don't want to. For example, here, if I advance some frames and modify the X position, it will be animated. So if you are only doing the initial setup, turn the animation off, or just try to do all the adjustments on a single frame. The Y position will move on the vertical axis. We also have the rotation, and there's a handy reset button. We can do scale as well, and we also can do the shear. It will skew the image, and also the perspective that will create a perspective distortion from the original position. So these parameters will be used in relationship with the original surface, so the original surface quality is of great importance. The next option, the 3D offset, is a very interesting toolset that will allow you to offset the insert clip on the Z-axis, making it possible to create a depth effect. Alright, I created a keyframe on a wrong position, so I will just correct this, remove the keyframe, and here remove this position. Okay, now it's working fine. So you can use positive and negative depth values, and also you can tilt the image, giving it an angle. You can see the center here on the viewer. And you can also rotate the image, giving a 3D rotation effect. And one great thing about this yellow offset surface is that we can export it to other softwares, just like we can do with the original surface on the track and adjust track modules. You just need to use the export offset data and select the desired export format. I will not do it right now, so we'll hit cancel and move to the Insert tab of the Insert module. Here on the Insert sub-tab, we have the Comp, Blur and Render settings. The opacity setting will control the Insert Clip Transparency. It's a very simple control. For example, 0.1. I will go back to 1. The gain control will basically increase or decrease the image brightness, so you can better match the background plate. On the blur section we have the focus blur, where you can match camera focus if you need. And the motion blur will allow you to automatically generate motion blur for your insert clip based on the surface movement. You can increase the motion blur attribute value to match the original plate motion blur. On the next section we have the anti-aliasing, which is related to the image smoothness, and it helps to reduce jagged edges effects. If your insert clip is too sharp or it has jagged edges, just increase the anti-aliasing value. Usually you need to increase the anti-aliasing value for big images on insert clips that are being scaled down. And the enhance edges attribute is the opposite of the anti-aliasing. It will sharpen your image in the case that your insert clip image is too smooth in relation of your background. I will not use it for this project. And the last attribute that we have here is the warp. To understand the warp, I need to turn on the overlay. And the warp is basically a mesh warp that provides you 4 levels of distortion to use. The usage is very simple. Just drag the warp points to create the deformations, and the edge points are very useful to match surface borders that are not exactly straight lines. It is a very handy tool, and it will follow the surface movement. So let's take a look. I will undo these deformations, and the mesh warp has 4 levels that you can modify. Always start with the lowest level, level 1, and move to the next levels as you need more complexity to your deformations. I will undo these deformations and turn off the mesh. I will not use the warp for this project. I will just keep these parameters using motion blur for this project. The last tab to view here is the edge. The edge parameters will allow you to create a edge smoothness for your insert clip, something similar to the edge width parameter that we can use on the layer shapes, creating a smooth transition from the edge to the center of the image. So here on the controls we have the top, down, right and left edges. The lock attribute will lock all the values of all the edges together. Let's try a lower value like 0.05. So it's a very handy attribute that will help you to speed up the edge setting. And you also have the horizontal lock, which will lock the right and left edge parameters. And we also have the vertical lock, which will lock the upper and lower edge values. And to finish, at any time you can reset all edges using the reset button. After you have set up all the insert module settings, it's time to render and save these images for later use. You can save the full composite of the background with the insert clip, or you can save just the insert clip to use on other softwares to finish the composite and such. So first, let's render the whole sequence. I will not render this to the end, we'll hit stop. And you can see the generated clips here on the output tab. You have the layer clip and also the output clip, which are generated automatically for you as you render. Let's take a look on each one. The composite phone is the output clip and is the final composite, including the background image. And the layer phone is the layer clip, which is just the insert clip image rendered with the current settings, and you can see that it has a RGB and alpha channel. To export the layer clip or the output clip in a correct way, you should locate the clip here on the pull-down menu before moving to the export rendered clip option on the file menu. This is important because the export rendered clip options will be based on the image that is loaded on the viewer. For example, for the layer phone, we have the color and alpha options enabled. So you just need to select your export file format and hit OK. If I am on the composite phone clip, move to the export rendered clip and try to select the layer phone, you will see that the alpha option is not enabled. So it will export, but not in the way that you want. So just make sure that you are with the correct clip loaded on the viewer and you will have no problem to export the files. I will save my rendered sequence to the disk. And remember that if you want, you can use customized names for the clips generated on the Output tab. Just click on the New button to set the custom name. On this chapter, I will show to you how to use the Mocha Pro lens module. Let's take a look first on the footage. I will hit play, and as you can see, the footage is heavily distorted by the lens. And due to this lens distortion, all the straight lines on the image are somewhat curved. I have chosen this image due to the extreme lens distortion that will make easier for you to understand how to use the lens module, but you can work with any degree of lens distortion inside Mocha Pro. So basically here on the lens module, you will compute the lens distortion of the scene, and after that all the other modules of Mocha Pro will use this information when working with the planar tracking and such. So it's important that you calibrate the lens before you move to any of the other modules of Mocha Pro. Before working on the actual scene calibration, I want to show you the calibration modules that we have here on the calibrate section. The one parameter calibration module has the K1 parameter, and if you modify the value here, you can see the effect that it will apply to the image. The one parameter model is recommended to be used when the lens has a small degree of distortion. The second model that we have here is the 2 parameter, which will enable the K2 parameter, and this additional parameter will add another degree of complexity to the lens distortion model. The 2 parameter is recommended to be used when the 1 parameter is not enough to capture all the lens distortion of the image. The 1 parameter INV model is to be used with images coming from the RealVis RZ3 software. So you will be able to use the same value from RealVis lens distortion here on Mocha Pro and use it to distort or undistort images. And the last calibration model is the anamorphic. It has 4 parameters, so it is the most complex model that we have here on Mocha Pro. You should use it when you have extreme lens distortion or when working with very difficult lens to solve. You can see that I'm playing here with the parameters, and it can handle a large variety of lens distortion. Okay, with all the calibration models explained, let's take a look on how to create the lens calibration here on Mocha Pro. The first thing to do is locate the straight lines of the scene. We start by clicking the Locate Lines button, but first we need to disable the overlay to be able to see the lines. Sometimes when you click on the Locate Lines button, the overlay appears again, so just click the overlay button to get rid of it. And now we can see the green lines that are the lines located by the software. The minimum line length parameter will affect the number of lines that Mocha Pro will find for you. I'll use a lower number, like around 20, and now the procedure is to click on the new line button and locate the same line segments that represents a straight line. For example, these 4 segments on this yellow element edge. When you finish a line, just click on the new line button again to start a new one, and keep repeating this procedure, finding the maximum number of straight lines that you can on the scene. You should create horizontal and vertical lines, and also cover all the regions of the image around the edges of the frame and on the center of the frame as well. So keep repeating this process. The shortcut for the new line button is the letter N, so you don't need to hit the button every time. And if you select a wrong line segment by mistake, just use the undo feature to fix the error. Okay, I will select just a couple more lines. One more. And I think that is enough to do the calibration. So the next step is select the calibration model. For this scene, I will use the 1 parameter calibration. Below the calibration model, we have 2 parameters, equidistant lines and calibrate center. The equidistant lines parameter is to be used when you have a calibration grid image. Let me show here a grid image example. The grid image is a printed image that has equidistant lines and should be captured with the same lens of your project footage. Whenever possible, you should use the grid to get a nice lens distortion model to work with on Mocha Pro and other softwares. It will usually generate a more accurate model than just finding the straight lines of the actual footage. Okay, let's get back to Mocha Pro. In this project, we don't need to use the equidistant lines. So let's take a look on the next option, Calibrate Center. The Calibrate Center is used to find the center of the lens, because sometimes the lens center is not exactly where it should be in the center of the image. So the calibration model needs to be adjusted. It's easier to identify this problem on a calibration grid image. The center of the lens is represented by this yellow cross here, and you can modify it manually if you want, using the lens center X and Y parameters. The last parameter is the focal distance, and it's a very important one. The focal distance will define the lens angle based on the film back size, and it has a great impact on the lens calibration. If you don't know the focal distance, you will need to do an approximate guess. So on the online documentation of Mocha Pro, we have a nice chart that will help us to figure it out. On the help menu, we have the online help link. Click on it, load the page. Let's go to the lens module section. Scroll down to the focal distance, why it matters, and we have the chart here with some presets. I know that my footage is HD, so looking at this line, the real-world equivalent film back size is 4/3 inches. Keep this value in mind and scroll down to the next table. Here we need to guess the lens angle, and I suppose that is between 180 and 90 because of the heavy distortion, and with the 4/3 inches value, find it on the table and we can see that the focal length is probably something between 7 and 8. So now that we have an approximate guess of the value, I will go back to Mocha Pro and use a value of 8 to feed the calibration model. Everything's set here, so I will hit calibrate, and it's easier to see the calibration with the planar grid turned on, and this is the calibration calculated for this lens. Now that the lens distortion is calculated, we can move on to the other Mocha Pro modules, like the track, insert, remove, stabilize, and such. Or we can use this information to undistort this image, for example. So to do that, just make sure that the distortion is enabled and you are with the undistort option and hit enter. And now you can see that the distortion was removed and you can send these rendered images to other softwares. So to do that, you need to go here on the Output tab, and you can see that an undistorted clip was created automatically for you. If you want, you can also create a clip with a custom name. So, for example, undistorted footage street. Okay, I will render the whole image sequence. I will go backwards, come back here and render it forwards. Okay, now that the whole sequence is rendered, you can save these rendered files using the Export Rendered Clip option on the File menu. Just select the custom clip that you created and choose the desired export settings like we saw on the rotoscope chapter. I will hit cancel here, and now I will move to the other Mocha Pro modules and do a quick insert to show the lens calibration affecting the other modules. First, I will do a planar tracking. The undistorted images are loaded on the viewer, so I will change this to the original footage. And now create my tracking layer for this region. And just do a quick track to show the calibrated lens in action. It's already possible to see that the planar tracking is following the lens distortion correctly, and if you turn on the planar grid and set up the surface for this layer, just adjust the corners of the surface, and it's possible to see that the planar grid is distorted. And if you follow the vertical lines of the planar grid, you can see that they match exactly the curved lines of the advertisement display. And now I will just reset my surface, and I will go to the Insert module and load the Mocha Pro logo that we have here and disable the overlays. The insert is working correctly. matching the lens distortion. So my job is finished here, and my final advice are: remember to use the lens module before going to the other Mocha Pro modules, and also when you can't find enough lines to do the calibration, or when the calibration is not successful, you can try to do it manually using the parameters on the Lens tab. Let's take a look now on the remove options of Mocha Pro. Load the project with the default settings, and if we look at the footage, there's a camera movement, and I will remove this man that is falling. To do a removal on Mocha Pro, you always need to have at least one tracked layer to be used as the background information, and of course you need to do a layer for the removal subject, but for the removal subject there's no need of tracking information. You can use a regular layer or a tracked layer if you want. So let's first create a tracking layer for the background. I will use this region below the man to do the tracking. It's a very easy tracking. So now I will rename this layer. I will call it background track. Turn off the tracking and visibility. And now I will create my background region that I will use to create the removal. This background region will be used to extract the clean parts of the background to do the removal when the man is over that part. I need to link it to the track. Let's rename it to background. And now let's just move on the timeline and see if all the needed parts are covered by this region. The man will need to be inside of it all the time. And we should try to avoid moving elements like the other man, because the removal area will use it if he's inside the background. We should have only the removal subject and the clean background areas inside this layer. Okay, I guess it's done. I will scrub the timeline one more time to check if the man is inside this area. Okay, now let's do the layer for the removal subject. I will draw a mask around him and try to leave the mask as near as possible of the subject to reduce the removal area. The smaller the area, the better your result will be. I will link this mask to the tracking layer and give it a name, removal. And now I need to animate the mask to match the subject. You can press the Q letter to use the translate tool. Let's go back and check between the keyframes if the subject is inside the mask. Try to not miss any part of him. And now let's adjust the mask again, moving some points around. Just need to be sure that no part is left outside the mask, like the feet here. Checking back again, moving forward. Here the leg is going up, so I will need to create more points for this mask. Use the insert point tool. 4 points is enough. And now I will just raise these points and adjust the others to reduce the area of the removal subject to be as near as possible of him. Okay. And now to the end of the image sequence. Let's do the final adjustments of the mask. And now that's finished, let's do a quick review to check if the removal subject is inside the mask all the time. I will use the matte button. Yeah, it's looking that the man is inside the mask all the time. So we are done here. I will turn on the background layer again. And one important factor for the removal is the layer ordering here on the layer controls. The removal layer needs always to be above the background layer area, that is the layer that was tracked, or linked to a layer with planar tracking information. So pay attention to that and always be sure that the removal subject is inside the mask all the time, because if the removal subject is not, the removal will not work. So now let's move to the removal module, and I will select the removal subject layer and hit render, so you can see that the removal is already working. To do that, the removal module looks into the other frames and tries to find the clean areas without the removal subject and use this information to fill in the removal subject layer. Okay, so now I will hit render and render the whole sequence, and we can see that the removal was successful, but as you can see here, there's a piece of the removal layer that was not removed. And this happens because this area was never clean during the whole image sequence, so there was no information to use to do the removal. When this happens, you can try to use the flood fill option. The flood fill will try to use the nearby pixel information to try to fill the missing regions of the background layer. Sometimes it works and sometimes it not, especially when the region is big like we have here. It looks like a blurred region, but when you use it with smaller regions, it works better. Okay, so the flood fill is not an option. I will turn it off and re-render these frames. And before moving to the solution of this problem, let me explain the 3D compensation option. This option is used when you have a background that is not exactly planar. The classic example would be a wire or a rig to be removed that's passing over a face. The face is not exactly planar, so the 3D compensation will try to improve the removal with special calculations. Okay, so now let's try to see how to solve this problem using another Mocha Pro feature. One possibility will be the use of a clean plate. The clean plate will be a frame that you will paint to fix the problem and bring it back to Mocha Pro, and Mocha Pro will use it to fill in the missing information from the background. When you render the removal operation, here on the Output tab, you can see the clip that is automatically created, and this clip is saved inside your results folder. So we can grab this frame, and on Photoshop we can remove that area to create our clean plate. Here is the first frame of the removal. I will open it on Photoshop, and now let's just use the Photoshop tools to clean this area. I'm here on Photoshop CS5, so I will try to do a content aware fill using the Shift F5 shortcut. It's a good start, but there are some edges issues. We need to create a better transition. I will use the Good and Old cloning stamping tool to just blend this spot better with the rest of the frame, mixing the colors and creating a better transition of the painted part. Okay, I think that's finished. So I will save the file. You can't use the PSD file, so I will save as a TGA and name it clean plate. Okay, and go back to Mocha Pro. And now let's import the clean plate here on the Input tab. Hit Import. This new window will open. Click on the folder icon, locate the file, hit Open, and here we have to identify the frame number of this plate because we have a camera movement in this project. If it was a static camera, we could leave it at all. So let's use the frame number 1, and now we can hit the render button and see the result. Something that's important to know is that the clean plate is used only on the region that was missing. The rest of the information is coming from the other frames as the previous removal. It's looking good, but if we look closer, we can see that the transition from the clean plate to the rest of the frame is not smooth as it should be. To fix that, we can use the dissolve parameters and use the blend or randomize options to improve the smoothness of the transition area. The dissolve width attribute will use information from several frames to help smooth the transition. So the higher the number, the better it will be. I used here a value of 10 and the result is almost perfect. I think that I will raise the number to 20 and see the result. Yeah, now we have a very smooth transition. So let's use this value to render the whole sequence. Okay, so let's render it forward. The first frame always takes a while to render because Mocha Pro needs to load the frames on the memory to do the removal. And the removal is finished using the clean plate to fill in the missing part. Let's take a look on the whole image sequence. And here we used the clean plates only to fill in the missing parts of the removal. But if you want, you can use only clean plates to do removals. Just need to check this option here on the input tab and hit render. When I render here, there's a small change on the removal. And for easier projects, you can use only clean plates, but for more complex projects, it's always good to use the rest of the frame's information, especially if you have illumination changes on the footage. Okay, so before moving to the next removal example, I would like to show to you how to use the search range parameters, which are very important. To do that, I will disable the clean plate, and I will also load a special image sequence on the input clip, that is the clip that is used to do the removal. I will hit import, locate the clip, and hit open. The clip was imported, but here on the input clip, I don't know if it's a UI bug. It's not showing the name, but it's here on the project, okay? Let's take a look on the clip. It's the same clip, but I have rendered the frame number over each image so you can better understand how to use the search range parameters. Let's remove the clean plate here again and select the layer, turn on the overlay for the viewer. The alternate clip is loaded, but the name is not showing. Hit render, and we can see here the information that was used from each frame to fill in the removal area. So you can observe that we have information from the frame 3, 4, 5, 7, and etc. I will disable the dissolve width because the dissolve width mixes several frames to create the removal. So it will be easier to understand the search range parameters. Okay, now with the dissolve width at 0, we can see the frames that were used to do the removal. There are information from the frames 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 12. For each frame on the timeline, if we render, we can see that a different region is used based on the clean background availability to remove the subject. And this is related to the search range. When the search range first frame is at 1 and the last frame is at 0, the search range is basically using these two parameters, the number of frames before and the number of frames after the current frame, to fill in the removal area. So, for example, let's see what happens if we change the number of frames after to 1. Let's hit render, and what happens is that the removal will be made using the frame 1 and the next frame, the frame 2. I will increase the frames after to 6. Let's see. Now we have the frame 1 to 7 being used to do the removal. So you can see how it works. The default parameters for the removal are using 15, that is the entire frame range for this project. So this will guarantee that wherever you are on the timeline, it will always use all the frames to do the removal. It's important to know that these values are animatable. So if you are on frame 1 and change these values on frame 8, you will have different setups for each frame. So for example, if I come here to the frame 8 and change my frames before and after to the value of 2 and hit render, it will only use the frames from 6 to 12. And you may need to do that, for example, in a project that has a lot of illumination changes, and if you use information too far away from the current frame, the result will not be good. And when you use the first frame and the last frame, Mocha Pro will use the intersection of all the 4 values here on search range, with 15 before and 50 after. Starting at frame 1 and last frame at 0, Mocha Pro will use all the frames available. But if I change the last frame, for example, to a value of 7, I will hit render, and you can see now that the intersection of all the 4 values is used, limited by the first frame and last frame on this case. Just one last example. I will set the first frame to 5 and the last frame to 7, and this will be the possible removal based on these frames. This of course will be based on the availability of the clean background region within this frame range. Okay, and the last parameter that we have here is the step. The step is a value that will make Mocha Pro skip frames when doing the removals. This is useful when you are working with image sequences that are very long, because to do the removal, Mocha Pro needs to load all the frames in the search range in the memory. And depending on the number of frames, it will take a lot of time to do the removals. So using the step parameter, you can tell Mocha Pro to use every 2 frames, every 3 frames, every 5 frames, and improve the speed of the removal operations. As a second example of removal, I will use the phone that we already did the tracking and the adjust track for the screen surface, so I can just continue and do the removal. Okay. For this removal project, I will remove the Sony Ericsson logo here from the phone. To do that, I need a background shape with tracking information. That is already done here, and so I just need to create the removal area with a new layer shape. So I will use the X-Spline tool and draw the removal area. I will include this small detail over the logo. Because the logo is too near of it, I will name the layer removal area and link it to the screen track, and as I did the adjust track for this layer, I will use the link to adjusted track option below the link to track pull down menu. Now I will just check that the logo is inside the removal area all the time. I will turn on the stabilize to make my job easier. And yeah, the logo is inside the removal area all the time, so we are good to go and move to the remove module. Just remember that the layer ordering is important. Keep the removal area above the background or the remove will not work. Okay, here on the remove module, I will need to create a clean plate to do the removal because unlike the previous project, the background is never free of the logo, so we need to do a clean plate. To create a clean plate, I will choose the first frame of the animation, and on Photoshop I will do some painting work and remove the logo. It will be just a simple and fast use of the clone stamping tool. I will sample the nearby areas and paint the logo out of the cell phone surface, trying to use the areas that are near to the region to create a smooth transition from one side to the other, taking care to not create repeated patterns. And it's almost finished, just removing some artifacts from the compression of the image. And now we are good to go back to Mocha Pro. I will save the image as a TGA file. Mocha Pro can't handle PSD. So now back to Mocha Pro, I will load the clean plate clip. Locate the file, so it's the frame 1. I need to assign the frame number for this image because I used the first frame of the image sequence. And for this project, I will use the option Use Clean Plates exclusively, to use only the clean plates to do the removal. And we can render now the whole sequence, and let's wait the result of this removal. I will do a small fast forward in time here. The result is looking nice. Okay, the removal is finished. It's looking good, but we can observe that there's a color difference because the clean plate was created at frame 1, and on the later frames we have a different color of the surface because of the cell phone angle and the plastic surface reflexes. So in the beginning of the image sequence we have a nice result, but to the end we will need to fix this issue. To solve this kind of problem, we can use the illumination model parameters. The illumination model will analyze the image sequence and look for illumination changes and apply these changes to the removal area. We have three options. None is turned off. Linear, it will look for illumination changes globally in the image. So it will analyze the whole image to get the lighting changes. And interpolate will look for global illumination changes and also local illumination changes near the removal area edges. For this project, I will use the interpolate model because there is a variation of lighting between each side of the removal area, and the last parameter, the smoothing level, is related to the interpolate model and will affect the smoothness of the transition from one side to the other when using the interpolate model. Okay, so now I will use these parameters, go back to the beginning of my image sequence and re-render the whole removal area again and see the result. I will turn off the overlay. Okay, I will stop here for a moment and let's take a look here on this frame and compare it to the previous one with the linear model. Here on the linear model we can see the color difference between the removal area and the rest of the surface, and here on the interpolated model we can see that the colors are being blended with the nearby regions, creating a smoother result. I will continue my render. Alright, the removal is finished. We can see that the result is smoother and better than the linear one, but around this position here on the timeline we can see that the blending with the nearby region is creating an undesired effect, making the removal surface a little bit brighter than it should be. But anyway, it's a better result than the linear or the non-illumination models. Well, so to further improve this removal, I will need to create more clean plates to the problematic areas that I found. To do that, I will edit the clean plate and add more clean plates that I will need to do manually on Photoshop. So I have prepared the other clean plates that I will need here previously using the same technique of clone stamping. So let's take a look on them. Here I have the clean plate for the frame 1, 15, 20, 40, and frame 80. All of them made on Photoshop. So I will go back to Mocha Pro and load these new clean plates on my clean plate clip. Just select the rest of the clean plates. You can see that the frame number was automatically identified. And now I will do a new render of the removal, and Mocha Pro will use all these new clean plates to do the removal. Basically, Mocha Pro will interpolate from one clean plate frame to the other, creating a transition with these clean plates. So for example, I had the frame 1 and the next one is the frame 15. So Mocha Pro will make a transition between these two frames, and from frame 15 to 20, from 20 to 40, and from 40 to 80. So the higher the number of the clean plates, the best your result will be. If after rendering you find a place that needs improvement, just add additional clean plates and the new transition from one clean plate to the other will be better. The render is almost finished. Okay, so let's take a look. Hit play. Yeah, it's looking fine. It's improved from the previous result. And as you can see, it's not that difficult to get this result using Mocha Pro, but maybe trying to do that using other softwares would be really harder to get the same result. So now let's take a look on the stabilize module of Mocha Pro. Let's review the clip first. It's a handheld camera, very shaky, so let's use Mocha features to improve and stabilize this shot. First, I will need to create a planar tracking layer. I will use this car here to do the tracking because the car is always in the same position in relationship with the street level. So let's start tracking. It's a very simple track, and the car is always at the same distance from the camera car, so it will be a good source of tracking. Okay, almost finished. I will turn on the grid. Yeah, no problems here, so let's move on. I will rename the layer car track, and we can move to the stabilize module. Stabilize module will use the planar tracking data, and we can stabilize the translation, rotation, zoom, shear, and perspective. And we can stabilize all of them together by clicking on the all motion. When the layer is active here on the layer controls, we can hit play and see the stabilization. What we can see here is the stabilization based on the X and Y translation attributes. Yeah, it's already a better result than before, but I will stop and activate the rotation parameter. Hit play. Yeah, this is good. This is what I was looking for. So yeah, it's a great stabilization. Let's hit stop. So what we can observe here is that the stabilization will keep the layer fixed on the frame and move the rest of the image to adjust for the stabilization. So the side effect is that some parts of the image are missing because of the stabilization process. And it's almost impossible to run away from this problem when doing stabilizations. So let's take a look here on some of the stabilization parameters. Here you just need to select the desired motion parameters to stabilize. The number of frames is very important. It will define the amount of stabilization across a frame range. If the value is low, it will stabilize quicker movements, and if the value is higher, it will adjust longer movements. So usually when you use higher numbers, it will in fact not only stabilize the movement, but it will smooth longer movements. So I will change my value here from 10 to 50, and you can see now that the stabilization is smoother, but also the missing parts of the frame increased as well. You get a nicer result, but you start to losing more parts of the frame because of the adjustment needed. So sometimes you need to make a choice. Do you want a smoother result and lose more parts of the frame? Or do you want more parts of the frame and maybe a result that is not that smooth? And we also have here another option that's called maximum smoothing, and this will disable the number of frames and will give the best result based on the planar tracking data and also on the motion parameters like the translation and rotation that I have selected here. Well, okay, so I will disable it and use the number of frames at 50. To solve the missing parts of the frame problem, Mocha Pro gives you some parameters here on this small window on the border tab. First, we can use the center, and this parameter will move the image and minimize the loss of frame image during the whole image sequence. So let's take a look here. It's not a perfect result, but it will improve the area that is kept. The second option is the zoom, and the zoom will basically scale the image. It will remove all the missing areas from the frame, and it's the easiest option to use, but you will lose image quality because sometimes you may need to scale the image by 50% or so use it with care. And you can also use both options together and usually get a better result. It's a good combination to be used. The apply crop option will use the clip mask parameter to apply a crop on the stabilization. The problem of it is that you can't visualize it on the viewer. You need to render using the export rendered clip option. Mocha Pro also offers you another possibility to improve the missing parts of the frame problem. So I will disable the center and zoom here to go back to the original state and try to use the autofill tab. The autofill will use the tracking information of the layers that you have on your scene to try to complete the missing areas of the frame. This scene is not a great example to show it, but I will prepare here one example so you can understand how it works. I will move back here and track the car panel. Track it just for a few frames forward. Okay, I will go back here and track backwards for a few frames. That's fine. I will rename the layer to autofill example and go back to the stabilize module. I will disable the autofill example layer so it will not contribute to the stabilization motion that we already did. And I will pick here a frame to use the autofill, and the autofill will use the planar tracking data and it will use the search range information to look for 10 frames forward and 10 frames backward in this case, and try to find the rest of the information that was needed to fill the missing parts of the image. It is an interesting feature, but it will be limited to the tracked layer area, and you need to be able to track different parts of the scene to be able to use it. So for example, on this scene, the sky, the rest of the street, these elements are really hard to track, so they are not good subjects to use with the autofill here. So the parameters of the autofill are the search range, the model illumination that will look for global illumination changes on the scene and affect the reconstructed area. The dissolve will blend several frames to create a smoother transition on the fill area. It's usually a good option to use because it will give better results. And And there's also the fill from background option that will try to use the background globally to fill in the missing areas. It's not a perfect solution. Sometimes it works, sometimes not. But for smaller areas of the frame, it can help to fix some small problems, but the results will really depend on the camera movements. So let's take a look on the last option, the Sharpen tab. The Sharpen will apply a filter on the image and will increase the sharpness of the image and should be used on stabilizations that are working with a lot of motion blur. The motion blur is still on the frame even if the images are stabilized, so the Sharpen can help fix this problem. Basically, these are the parameters of the stabilized module, and it's also good to know that you can also export the stabilized tracking data to other softwares like we can do with the tracking data and the adjust track data from the other modules. Just select your desired format and hit save. For the second project of the stabilized module, I will create a new project and load a QuickTime movie. This movie is standard definition with interlaced frames, so I will use the lower field option here and I will use just the first 300 frames. Hit OK. Here's the image on the viewer. It's a big camera movement, but the problem is that the movement is not smooth as it should be. So I will use the Mocha Pro Stabilize module to smooth the movement and improve the shot quality. Well, the first problem that I have here is that the image was loaded with the wrong aspect ratio. The image is squeezed and the footage interpretation by the new project window was wrong. So here on the Clip tab, on the settings, on the first pull-down menu, you can change the pixel aspect ratio to the NTSC anamorphic option. And another problem that I have here with this footage is that it has some black borders on each side of the image. So I will use the mask option of the Clip tab to remove these unwanted areas. It is basically doing a crop to adjust the work area. Now back to the track module. Before tracking the background for the stabilization, I will go here on the end of the sequence and track the guitar player because he is a moving subject and it can affect the quality of the background layer. So I will create a mask to isolate him, just a loose mask to use as a subtraction to the background layer. And I will track it, and you can see that even though he's moving, the planar tracking is working fine, so I will just keep tracking until it leaves the frame. I will do a small fast forward magic, and now that the man left the frame, I will just kill my tracking layer before it starts to moving too crazy. And I will set the in point for this layer using the current frame value, and it's finished. I will just give this layer a nice name, player subtract, and now move to the beginning of the image sequence and start tracking the background plane. I will use a different tracking technique here for this layer because if we track it as usual, the shape that I will draw will quickly leave the frame and I will have to create another layer to continue the track. I'm drawing my layer here clicking with the Shift key so I get straight corners for the shape, and I will rename the layer to background track and move it below the player subtract to be able to subtract the guitar player from the background layer. So I need to change the blend mode of the player to subtract, and now if I turn on the matte button I can see that the player is working correctly. So now it's time to go back to the beginning of the image sequence and start tracking. Like I was saying before, if I track it on the usual way, the layer will start to leave the frame and I will need to create another layer to continue the track. To overcome this problem, I will use the unlinked track technique. I will unlink the layer shape from the tracking. The planar tracking will still work as usual, but the layer shape will not move along with the tracked data. It will stay in the same place while the tracker uses the layer area to track the movement of the background. So I will start tracking here, tracking forwards, and I will turn on the planar grid and do a really fast forward because this layer will take a lot of time to track. It's a long sequence and a big area to be tracked. As you can see, the planar grid is moving along with the camera movement, so everything's fine. Almost there, just few more frames. Okay, the tracking is finished, so I will do a quick review of the tracking quality. We can see that the planar grid is following the camera movement with great precision. I will just scrub the timeline and check the rest of the image sequence. Yeah, it's looking fine and is a great situation to use the unlinked track technique. So I will move to the stabilize module, and here we can observe that the layer is already being stabilized. On the beginning of the image sequence, we can see the stabilization happening, but this is not the result that I expect. I want just to smooth the camera movement, and the final frame of this image sequence needs to be on the right place. So Mocha Pro has a nice feature called Fixed Frames. I will add my last frame to the frame list, and it will basically tell Mocha Pro to move the frame to the original position that it was before it was stabilized. So I will add the first and the last frame to the frame list, and Mocha Pro will stabilize all the motion between these two frames. Okay? I will just disable the player subtract layer so it will not participate of the stabilizing process, and I will increase the number of frames parameter to create a smoother camera movement. And let's take a look. It's already possible to see that the camera is being stabilized. We can see some missing parts of the frame. That means that the movement is being stabilized at some place. And to finish the stabilization process, we need to use the border parameters to get rid of the missing parts of the image and get a nice and stabilized plate. This camera movement is a great candidate to use the autofill option. The autofill will try to use the information of the already tracked layer to fill in the missing parts of the frame, and as movement is very predictable, I'm pretty sure that it will give a nice result. I just need to uncheck the zoom option here so we can start using the autofill option. I will start with a search range of 10 and enable the dissolve parameter to get a smoother transition to the recovered areas. So let's try from the beginning of the image sequence. I will hit the render forward button. Looks like it's not working. Probably it is not finding the information that it needs. So I will need to increase the search range so the autofill can look into a bigger range of frames to find the missing information. Let's try to render again. Yeah, now it's working. You can see that it is recovering almost all information that we need. With the exception of the corners of the image, which is probably a region that is not available to be used to recover the missing information. Anyway, it's a great result if we think that we don't need to use the zoom option, because when we use the zoom option, we lose image quality, and with the autofill, we can use almost 100% of the image size. To export the rendered stabilization, just make sure that the stabilized clip is on the viewer and use the export rendered clip options. Well, this is the end of the training. Here we saw how to use the planar tracking technology to realize several post-production tasks. On the first chapter, we saw how to create a new project, how to navigate on the user interface, and several examples on how to track surfaces. On the rotoscope chapter, we explored several ways to manipulate layer shapes, how to work with the edge width option, and how to link rotoscope layers to tracked layers to improve the speed of the rotoscope process. We also saw how to export rotoscope shapes and masks to other softwares. On the advanced tracking chapter, we saw how to use the blend modes and also how to use the adjust track module to improve the surface when the tracking module alone is not enough to solve the shot. We also explored several ways to export tracking data from Mocha Pro to other softwares. On the insert module chapter, we saw how to insert images on tracked surfaces with great precision and control. On the lens chapter, we saw the importance of using the lens distortion module to affect the other modules of Mocha Pro. Using the lens calibration, we saw how to distort or undistort image sequences. And last, on the stabilize chapter, we saw how easy it is to stabilize and smooth camera motion inside Mocha Pro. I hope that you liked the training, and I'm sure that the information presented here will help you to realize your future projects using Mocha Pro. My name is Magno Borgo, and thanks for watching.